Join me on a fascinating journey where I show you some of the techniques used in scale aeromodelling. Welcome back to the channel, modelers, and we're still working on my 1/5 scale radio controlled chipmunk, which I managed to prang during the summer, and I've been repairing it and adding a little bit more detail to it and correcting some of the things that would, really bugged me, such as the wing fairings. So if you've watched the previous videos, you will have seen how I've made the fairings a little bit more realistic by adding some blue foam, and I've also glassed some areas which will make it all round a lot stronger. So welcome back, and in this video we're going to be looking at taking the fin and rudder which we made earlier, or made and covered earlier, and I'm also going to be looking at covering the tailplane and modifying the rear of the fuselage. The rear of the fuselage right at the tail comes to a very square end, and it should actually be pointed. So what I'm going to do to make it a lot easier is I'm actually just going to cut the last probably, 3 inches, 75mm off the end of the fuselage and replace it with a lump of blue foam, which I'll shape. I'll then have to quickly glass cloth it, but that's not really too big a problem. I may even film straight over it. you know what I'm like. We'll know more once I've decided what I'm going to do. So that's the plan. We'll look at trying to get this tailplane, rudder and everything fitted onto the fuselage in this session. So here you can see the shape of the tail, and I've already rounded it off a bit. It was very square, and I've chamfered a bit of it off, but I'm going to what's happening is the inside is actually built up plywood sections, and it's unnecessary strength at the back here. The mounting for the tailplane is through here, so I'm going to lose this section of the tail completely. It's plywood at the moment, so it's going to actually be removing quite a bit of weight from the very tail end of the model, which is always a good idea. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut straight across. Actually, I've decided I'm going to cut there, so I'll cut that bit off, and then we'll keep going, and that's going to get replaced once the tailplane is fitted, get replaced with a block of blue foam. So let's go for it. Quite as straight as it should be. There we go. And then I'm just going to replace that with a block of blue foam. That's a fair little bit of weight there. You can see it's even got bulkheads inside. So why it needs to be that strong, who knows. Lump of blue foam is probably actually that strong to allow the whole fuselage to be shipped, and it survived without the rear end getting broken off in shipment. That may be the only reason, who knows. I could actually come a lot further forward, take a bit more off, but I don't want to interrupt the tailplane seating area. That's got to obviously keep some strength in it. So there we go. That's that cut off. I'm just going to sand it true. There we go. Now if we look at the tailplane, you can see that the tailplane seat is made a quarter square, or it's quarter wide, a little bit taller than quarter square. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this section of it here. I'll just put it on temporarily just to see how much of that I'm going to lose. Now this, of course, is an ideal opportunity because that's where the elevator hinge line passes through. You could fit a single bell crank here, or a single horn, to connect, maybe just offset slightly to one side, and then you could go through here to do a single push rod to do the elevator. I'm not going to do it because there's structure in here. There's more structure in this model than it really needs, but there's structure in through here which is not going to allow push rod through, so I'm not going to worry about it. So that's where the tailplane is going to go. and that's where I'm going to lose some of this structure at the back. What I need is a pen. I haven't got one. Let's go and get a pen and do it properly. So let's just temporarily fit the tailplane so that we can mark off exactly how much of this we're going to remove. I'm going to remove it from there to there. Yeah. So we're removing from there. Across to there. I'll cut both at the same time, that keeps them in line. There we go. So these parts are going to be lost. We'll replace all of this with a chunk of foam. And I'm actually going to reinforce this because these have come loose. These came loose when I was trying to split the tailplane away from the fuselage. The tailplane can probably be covered now. I'm just trying to think whether this blue foam needs to go on before or after. No, I think the tailplane could probably be covered in that state there, and then we'll add the blue foam and fill the joints. So I might do that next. So I couldn't resist. I shrouded the rudder, so I thought I may as well shroud the elevator as well. So I rounded the leading edge off. I didn't have to add any more meat in this case, or any more balsa. I just rounded off what was there. I then drilled holes and filed slots, etc. to use these. I think these are medium-sized Robart pin hinges. I don't think these are real Robarts, because real Robarts are usually grey in colour. These are a little bit more white, which makes me think they're clones. But anyway, I've used 3 of those because they're not particularly large, but the load is not high, and I inadvertently managed to get glue on one of the hinge points on one of these, and by crikey was it difficult to get it out, to remove it. Not out of this bit, but out of this bit where you think there's actually not much holding that, but it really was strong. And as you can see, I did quite a bit of damage just trying to get the flipping thing out. So any of you that are thinking, that's not a very strong way of doing it, think again. This is how I did it on the first one, thinking I needed that strength. And I put plates on either side to give it more gluing surface. And if that one was difficult to get out without the plates, those are just going to destroy the thing trying to get them out. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to use that profiling, that little profile tool I made with the sanding edge, and sand a route a slot along the trailing edge of the tailplane that I can then drop in a 1/4 inch wide or 6mm wide piece of 64th. I'm not sure what 1/64th is in metric, so pardon me for mixing me units, but I'm going to drop in a 6mm wide piece, an 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little bit more than an 1/8 of an inch on the tailplane, and another 1/8 of an inch hanging over the end, and that'll just give somewhere for that'll just shroud the joint. It'll close the gap between the two parts, between the moving part and the fixed part. Anyway, I'll get the little tool out, we'll sand those edges, and then we'll cover them. In this instance, I'm going to use this little tool, and it's similar to the one I used for the fin and rudder, but it's slightly longer, and it's got a longer shelf to sit on the tail. The only thing is it's very deep. I'm not going to worry about that. What I'll do is I'll just make the 64th inch ply that depth plus a little bit. It's a little bit too much material that it's sanding away, but it'll give us a nice seat for the 64th ply. So I'll use that to create the rebate. These should just pull off because they're not glued into the tailplane yet. What I tend to do to avoid getting glue all over the place and making the hinges lock is I glue in the section where the hinge knuckle is actually closest to all the wood. I do this piece first because I can get inside to glue it behind the joint so that I don't seize up the that. And then when I glue these to the tailplane, I put epoxy on here, and then when I push it in, it will only go in that far, and the epoxy should never creep to the hinge. But I also coat just the hinge, just the joint, with a tiny little drop of machine oil. It's sort of oil I use to lubricate indoor electric motors, just to stop them potentially seizing. I did the same for this one, and it did glue. Some CA got round the back here and sucked along, and it seized it. So that's what I'm going to do. Something's just catching, and it might still catch, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if you can see that, but there's some lovely shallow rebate all the way along the rear edge there with a sharp corner, and the 64th ply will just drop in there nicely. Once the slots are all cut, I then cut some strips of 64th ply. And this is 9mm wide, so it gives us about 3mm overhang, which is about right, and it sits nicely in the slot, just like that, and it's perfectly flush. So all we have to do is glue that down, make sure we're absolutely in the slot when we do it. And what I like to use for this is thick CA, so I'll put a thin bead all the way along that slot, making sure there's no gap in the glue. It needs to be all the way along, and I'm biasing it towards the front of the slot, front of the rebate. And then this ply goes in, and you have to make sure you push it right up against the edge of the rebate, all the way along. Now the thick CA gives you a bit of time to get it right. If you want a bit more time, then use aliphatic or a PVA, but it's just come out of the slot a little bit there, just lifted. Would be on the top surface, wouldn't it? But the 64th ply will sand nicely, so we should be able to lose that little bit of a lip there. And then once that's set, which it has, then I like to use some thin CA in the joint just along the back. I just run that all the way along the edge, and that just soaks in and just finishes off the edge of it. The very tip, just trim with a pair of scissors. I've just got to wait for that CA to flash, otherwise it'll go on my scissors. Just like that. One more to do on this side, so I'll do that, and then we're almost ready for covering. And there we go. That's all nicely sanded, and it's fared in really nicely. You can see the area where the channel was not quite deep enough, right where it was in this corner. It's often difficult in corners to get the rebate tool to go right into the corner. So the ply was a little bit high, but as you can see, the ply has just sanded down, so it's all nice and flush now. Same on this corner. Tends to happen on the corners. The rebate just doesn't quite go in tight enough. So just want to make sure that these still fit nice and snug, that your shrouds don't restrict the movement too much. And that's the wrong one. That's the one for this side. I keep getting it wrong. That's wiggling around a little bit in the slot, but as long as I glue it centrally, it should be fine. Yeah, that looks good to me. There's plenty of clearance. That creaking noise is the hinges just moving in the slot. In the tailplane, the slot's a bit too big, so I might pack that out. Might put a little bit of balsa in there just to pack it out, just so that it doesn't move around quite so much. This one was a much better fit. That's gone all the way in, and that's catching a little bit on the back. That yellow hard area there is just catching on the shroud. Nothing on the top, it's only on the bottom. I'll sort that out and pack this one out a little bit, and then we'll get cracking with covering. So there we have the tailplane and elevators manufactured. What I'm going to do now is just put some ribbed tapes on, or ribbed tape, pinked tape on the elevators, just to give them a bit of depth. But they're not glued to the tailplane yet, but you can see the hinging is working fine, and the shrouds, you know, is a nice distance between the shroud and the surface. So I'll put some pinked tape on just to make them look a bit prettier, and then we're done. On the tail surfaces at least, and we can look at fitting the fin, the rudder and the tailplane and all these other bits soon. But first of all, I need to actually put some film on the fuselage, because I want to do it before the tail surfaces are in the way and stop me moving it around. I would have done the fuselage next, but I've actually run out of the silver Aura cover. So I've ordered some genuine Aura cover. That should have arrived today, but it hasn't, so it'll probably be arriving tomorrow. As soon as that arrives, we can cover the fuselage. But in the meantime, I'll just cover the elevator halves with a little bit of pinked tape. I've got a little bit of this left. This is from what used to be Gary Sibbert's company called Pinkit. It's now sold from Dynamic Balsa, I think, in the USA. You can buy this in various scales. It's a really nice material to use. It's really nice pinked cloth. The angle of the serrations is just about right. Mick Reeves also sells pinked tapes in various scales, and he'll also, talking to Jim, he also will cut, if you send him some covering, perhaps you really like this Diacov. If you send him some Diacov, he'll actually cut that into a pinked pattern like this and cut it into tapes for you. So whatever covering material you prefer, I believe he will pink for you into strips, which is maybe useful. Again, I'll put the link to Mick Reeves' models in the description of the video. All right, without further ado, I'll get on and add some pinked tapes to these bits. Now I'm only actually going to put the tape on the upper surface of the elevators because the underside won't really be seen, and this is just a fun model. It's not a true scale model, so I'm only going to do the upper surface. The main reason, well, apart from it only being a fun model and it not needing it, is I haven't got enough pinked tape to go around. But I think I might take Jim Reeves up on his offer of cutting tapes for me maybe in some of this Diacov. Or even Oratex. Oratex would be fine. In fact, it's probably Oratex that Jim Reeves uses by default now, obviously with Solatex going away. Right, so with that, I'm just going to add, I've not really got a lot left, you see, so I'm going to add a bit down the rear, and then I'll go around the tip. And then that's it, I think. The way the covering works on the full size is you do the rib tapes first and then you do the peripheral tapes afterwards, so that it seals the ends of the rib tapes so they can't lift during flight. Actually, I should have used the thick rib tapes for the rear here. I will on the other side, because the thick, being wider, I should say, not thick, but the wider one will actually wrap right around the leading edge, show on the underside. Whereas this one isn't quite going round. It's going round, but not very far. But I'm not too worried about the underside anyway. As I said before, I'm not putting tape on the underside. So that'll do that. And then around the tip, you see this thick is just a little bit too thick. What did I use it for? I used it on the rudder, and it was a little bit too thick, but we got away with it. Just looking at how much I got left, I've only got the ribs to do on the other side. So maybe I do the ribs on the other piece first, on the other surface. Do the ribs on here first, just to make sure I've got enough, otherwise I could run out, and that would be the end of that. Got a little bit left, not much, a little bit. And I'm going to use the thicker material on the trailing edge. You see how the thicker is actually perfect for doing this trailing edge. Wraps around equally, both sides, but I didn't put any tapes on this side. They go along the ribs, just on the trailing edge. Now, what I need to do is the tip now, and I think I'm going to use the thick. See if we can get it to go right round. Need about 4 hands to do this, really. And what you can do, if you're good, and sometimes you can get it quick, if you stretch it while you're putting it on down the middle, you can see it starts to curve and go round, and it uses some of the natural. See the tighter I pull it, you can see it's actually done a bit of the weave, the bend for you. And then if you just seal it down over that, then some of the shrink has been done on your behalf. To see how that's already starts to curve round. And then all we do is what I tried to show you before the battery ran out, is you go round leaning the iron over slightly, so it starts to shrink the material as you're putting it down. Now this is a little bit too wide, especially in this area here, so what I'm going to do here, I can see that's not going to go. I'll put a pleat in there. Little V cut, I think, give us room for it. Okay. And keep going with the iron around the tip, bringing it round and down. See this area here is down already, but we've got 4 little wrinkles in the covering just there. So if we just put the iron on it, see if we can get them to disappear, which they probably won't, because as I said, the material was just a little bit too wide for it really to work. Possibly try turning the iron up a little bit hotter just to see if it would take the wrinkles out. You can also try stretching it, just pulling it either side of the wrinkle to see if the material will move, but in this case it's not really moving. Oh, it has a little bit. I'm not sure if you can see that. You can virtually, it's virtually gone as far as feel goes. We'll get some paint on there, it won't be too bad. I'll not put a V in the trailing edge on this one, because I'm not really too worried. It's the underside, so keep doing that. And you end up with a few little tiny creases, because as I said, the material is just a little bit too wide for that. Now I should really have a piece running down the full width here, but I haven't got enough left, and I don't want to use the wide. What I could do is I could take some of this, actually that's where it's joined, look. When you buy this pink tape, it actually is lots of sections taped together. What I could do is I could take a piece that long and then cut it lengthways down the middle, and that'll give me my leading edge piece. It doesn't have to be perfect, but there we go. Those 2 pieces there should be enough to run along the leading edge to be the right way up there. Glue side down, please. So that can go there, like so, along the upper surface. and then this strip around the top. I'm going to do what we just did around the other side. I'm going to take a piece that's just the right length, and I'm going to cut it lengthwise again. The glue side is slightly shinier than the unglued side. Now this is the top, so I want the top to have the pinked bit. The bit that gets wrapped around the underside I'm not really worried about too much. So what I'm doing is effectively making the tape narrower. Like that. And then again we do this little pulling trick to get it to start shrinking. Get the lengths right, and now we'll just wrap it round as I did on the other side, but this time because there's less material overhang, I think you'll find that it should shrink straight back down and there will be no wrinkles. Just like that. There we go, no wrinkles. And then on the underside I'm just going to get rid of that excess. Again, there shouldn't be any wrinkles in that. Slightly harder work because it's a little bit more of an overhang. As you can see, there's one tiny little wrinkle there, but it's not to worry about. And this is the underside where you won't really see very much, but you'll see that there's something there, there's a tape there, but on this side you'll actually see that it's a pinked tape. So that will do. I should really run one along the back. We'll use the wide one again. Now this one you don't want underneath because it's where the elevator horn is going to go, so it's more or less just going to be flat along the inboard rib. And that just goes over the end. This area just here gets opened up and there's a horn to go in there. So that's all we can do on that side. And there we go. Now what I'd normally do to this, before I did any surface prep or painted it or anything like that, I would now put a layer of dope on top of this just to soften the edges of the pinked tape, because you don't want it harsh. When you spray it, it'll harshen up. Those edges will really show and they're too strong. So what I do is just put a layer of dope over that just to soften the edge off. But what I may actually do instead on this one is I'll go straight to a primer, put a coat of primer on to seal the edges, and then just lightly sand the primer off just to soften the edges of the tapes. But so it's, take your choice, do what you like. But a layer of dope on there will just soften it all off, or a layer of primer. But either way, you just soften it off and then just lightly sand it. And that should be that side of it done. But then that's the surface pinked and the tape's added. And there we go. There should be one around there. I think I might add just a bit on there, just for the leading edge, because it's obvious that it's not there. So we'll add just a section through there. I think I cut the piece in half. There we go. So we'll use this. I'll find the glue side that way. just add some along there, see if we can continue it on from that tape, as if that's how it would have been. It would have been the same piece of tape that continued all the way along, but this would have been around the edge. So just add that on there. I'm not going to go right round, I won't do the undersurface as I explained. Then we need to nick this in the corner. Let's just get rid of most of that because we don't really need all of that overhang. Then just wrap that round. That's that bit gone. And then that bit over the top. And there we go. So as I said, I'll either put a layer of dope on or just some primer on there to finish off. So the only task we have remaining now is I want to put some epoxy on the end of those, on the end of the hinges. So just put some epoxy on the end of here, generous blob. And then as you feed it through here, the blob will get spread onto the wood, and you can then just hold it with an angle like that while the epoxy dries. Just make sure they're in, and as the epoxy dries, that should leave us with the tailplane already hinged, ready to go. So I'll get some epoxy, put blobs on there, just close them up, and that'll be the tailplane finished. So this is just some 5-minute epoxy, well 4-minute Deluxe Materials epoxy. Just mixing it with a bamboo skewer, barbecue skewer type thing. Not putting loads on, but enough. I need it to attach. And then we just feed it in. Give it a little bit of a wiggle as it's going in so it's all making contact. And then we'll just let that drape down. Same on the other one. Actually, I can do both sides. I twizzle it around. This one was a bit thicker. A bit tighter, I should say. Now those hinges have also been oiled, so we'll leave it like that, and as the hinges have been oiled it shouldn't stick. If it does, you'll probably hear me screaming from this side of the country to the other. And there they've dried, so now our elevators, our surfaces are hinged. A little bit of a creaking noise from there, not sure why. It's just rubbing, but the surface doesn't move very far in normal use, so I think we'll be all right. So we'll leave that and let that go off a little bit more. Actually, I think it's that little bit there. There's a little bit of glue on the edge of the film there. Yeah, that's all it is. So when that dries, that'll be fine. When it dries, I'll just cut that little blob off. So there we go. Now, where's the fuselage? So here's the fuselage ready to go. Goes on here like this, and what I'll do is I'll pretty well attach it, and what's going on here? What have I done wrong? I've done something wrong. Goes on there. Oh, what an idiot, numbnut. So it goes on like that and gets glued. Hopefully you can see that. And then this gets glued on top of that, just like that. And that gives us our tail assembly, all nicely done. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to cut a notch through here and open this slot up. The way I did it the first time was I lowered, there's a piano wire rod down here that goes to the tail wheel and goes to a horn to operate the rudder with this servo arm here, and it did drop down on a post and then the rudder slotted in from the back. I can't do that this time because the way I've done it, the rudder has to come down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fit the rod to the rudder, to this whole assembly here, and then once this is fitted I'll then drop it down through and attach it. Hopefully that'll work, but we'll see. Anyway, that's what's going to happen. That's going to go on there, then that gets glued on there, and that finishes up our tail assembly. But they can't be glued on. Oops. They can't be glued on until the fuselage is covered, and I haven't got enough covering to do it yet, so I'm waiting for the model shop to deliver the bits and we'll be good to go. Alright, so that's all I'm going to do at the moment. Next thing to do is to cover the fuselage, and we're nearly there. And I know it's a bit of a long session, these videos, but I do appreciate you all sticking with it and following me through all of these ordeals and trials and what have you. So there we go. What I really wanted to do was to cover the fuselage, apart from the wing fairings, in this silver film, this Oro cover. And then I was going to spray paint the fairings. I tried that and I just couldn't get a good finish. Film over glass fibre just doesn't really work. The film really works well over bare balsa, where the air can get absorbed by the balsa, so you end up with a decent-ish finish. So I had to peel it all off, and this time when I peeled it off, because it was over glass that had grey primer on it, the heat melted the primer and it glued it to the Oro cover. So I had a lot of sticky residue on there to remove, and I used all sorts of things, the parcel tape, heated parcel tape, sticky stuff remover, all sorts of things to try and get rid of the stickiness. And it's been a bit fraught, so that's why there's not been many videos over the last few weeks. But I finally did manage to get the tail end filmed, and this is silver Oro cover. It's going to get painted anyway. The tail is just pinned on for now, but you get the idea. When it actually all gets glued together, I'll put some silver Oro cover over the joints so that they're all hidden as well. So the next step, well, there's two things I can do next. Well, it's three things really. I could get on with putting these tail bits together, but then that restricts the shape and size. You know, this makes this piece rather large for sanding. So I think I'll leave those right until the end. The other thing I could do is prep this and get some more primer on the front, which is a good thing to do. And also, while the primers may be drying, we can have a look at the cowl, which needs some serious repair work going on it. So we could do that as well in the meantime. As this front end is glassed, I may as well pop the canopy off, which is fairly easy to do. The problem being that we've got wrinkles in the film. So if this front bit is glassed, maybe I should just pop this canopy off and glass the top of the cockpit area, and then that can be sprayed at the same time as the fuselage is sprayed. I think that would probably be a nicer effect. I've always had trouble with the film inside the cockpit area, underneath the canopy, but of the film wrinkling, as you can see it has here, hopefully. And that's, you can't really correct it. Once the sun gets on it and it wrinkles, you have to take the canopy off, and it's glued on, so it's not so easy. So I think that's probably going to be a good idea, to pop the canopy off there and glass the framework. I think that'll be a good idea. Anyway, there we go. That's it for now, and I'll see you on the next video. So if you've enjoyed it, click the like button, and if you subscribe to the channel, you'll get notified of future videos, which will be brilliant for me.